Welcome back! This is James with the 9th and final episode of this FOXHOUND Rank video walkthrough. Snake is fully outfitted once more, so we'll re-infiltrate Groznyj Grad to sabotage the Shagohod. This sabotage operation can take a number of different forms, so we'll look at a few different strategies for laying C3 on the fuel tanks in the Mega Weapons hangar. Having set the bombs, we'll then descend into the maintenance pit for Snake's rematch with Volgin. The most effective and, I think, gratifying way to beat Volgin is using CQC and CQB tactics, so we'll look at how best to take him down manually. We'll review how to make it through Snake's and EVA's bike escape from Groznyj Grad, and we'll work through Snake's rematch, and re-rematch, and re-re-re-rematch against Volgin as pilot of the Shagohod. We'll pick up again with the bike escape toward the WIG aircraft, ultimately tumbling into a gorge and escorting EVA through 2 loadable areas before encountering our final fight against the boss. We begin where the last video left off. Snake has escaped Groznyj Grad and made it through the Sorrows River of the Dead. Now we'll need to manage Snake's inventory for our re-infiltration of Groznyj Grad. First, put away all of the items that you used during your escape, and equip our usual arsenal for non-lethally taking down enemies. Also remember to unpack the C3. This cave has some useful items in it which can be hard to locate given the similarity between the colors of the cave and item boxes. Use the thermal goggles to locate these. Now head north. Should you decide to use a rotten food strategy once back inside Groznyj Grad, throw 1 stun grenade just under these mats to knock them down and fill your menu with easily rotting food. Also in this cave you'll find 2 glowcap mushrooms. Be sure to kick these loose and add them to your menu as well. They'll be useful for your pit fight against Volgin. And here's number 2. Finally, be sure to go to the dead end past the exit and grab cardboard box B. Before we climb the ladder back into Groznyj Grad, let's go ahead and pull box B from our inventory. Once topside, we can approach Groznyj Grad in a number of different ways. Several of these were detailed in the last video, and I'm going to skip that level of detail for the approach back into Groznyj Grad. For the sake of expedience, we'll take the simplest route. Observe the guard near the 2 red doors and wait for him to turn around. Run wide around the armored car and head toward his location. Knock him out once you're there, and hug the walls as you make it to the truck. The dog should still be asleep when you head past, so hop inside, equip cardboard box B, and enjoy the delivery ride into the Shagohod's maintenance hangar.
The main wing hangar, huh?
Now we're back inside the Groznyj Grad facility, this time in the Shagohod hangar. There are maintenance workers in this area with unique uniforms, and we can play with that much in the same way that we could use the scientist outfit elsewhere. The maintenance uniform is located in the room where we stashed Rykov's body, so we're heading there now. Grab the maintenance uniform from this locker, and also grab the sneaking suit here. It's useful during the fights against Volgin and the boss. This is the last real sneaking area of the game, so let's start as before and scout the locations of threats. From our starting point, we can see one patrol directly ahead, and a second patrol on the elevated walkway on the other side of the level. Maintenance guys are really jumpy, so we want to keep them in mind too. There's one on the catwalk, and another inspecting the treads on the ground. There's a third poking some buttons on a diagnostic console. And there's a fourth whose path takes him to the fuel tank on the right. He sticks around here for a while, and we're mainly concerned about his walk toward the fuel tank. Let's take a look now from a bird's eye view. You can actually climb a couple of ladders up to the highest point of the level, and those ladders are located on the right side of the level from Snake's starting position. Here's the guy on the catwalk. And here's the guy inspecting the treads. Here's the patrol on the far side of the level from our starting point. This is the guy on the fuel tank. And here is the guy on the console. These are reference points for our third patrol located at the bottom of the decline ramp, just past the fuel tank on the right. This area's guard perceptions are really weird. There's a maintenance guy at the top of the stairs who I always take out first, and when you knock him out, the guards will not see Snake, but they will see the console guy getting knocked out. You can throw off the guards by putting on the maintenance uniform and running down to the mid-level of the stairs. The patrol on the left will lose interest, but the patrol on the right will stare at Snake indefinitely. If you toggle the cardboard box quickly, the staring guard will actually lose interest and return to his patrol route. And that's why communism failed. You'll want to be careful carrying around the C3, even in costume. Here I get the guard's attention by flipping over the rail, and he goes into alert when he sees Snake running around with a C3 in hand. Maintenance guys can be your biggest danger if you're out of costume. Unlike guards, they will not give you a grace period, during which they walk over to your location. They'll just freak out and go straight into alert. Now, if you want to take out the maintenance guys, I recommend against using the Nagant. It makes noise which drops Snake's camo index, and the engineers will trigger an alert even if they catch sight of Snake when they go down. Sniping here, even from a high point like this, just is not a good idea. The first guy doesn't see me because he's not looking at Snake. The second guy, though, is a different story. I've used that perch for position reference a few times now, so I'll show you where it is. From Snake's starting point, run on the ground level while staying to the right. You'll find the first ladder on this little plateau. At the top, run along this lip back toward the entrance. And you'll find the second ladder. Now, when Snake is at the top, and when I change out of costume, I'm much more visible to the engineers. In some ways more so, since there are fewer obstacles between their line of sight and my position. As you see here, an engineer has seen Snake, and he has generated a white exclamation point in the lower left corner. He'll keep his eyes on Snake, and he'll go into alert as soon as the camo index drops with the rifle's report. And all that is to illustrate the level of awareness you're looking at, depending on how you approach this area. So let's try one way of running through. The game limits what Snake can equip while wearing the scientist lab coat, and those restrictions are in place here as well. The cigarettes are one of the few weapons he can equip. If you want to be extra secure, you can take out guards and engineers in this area before actually planting the C3. Always start with the guy at the top, then hit the guy maintaining the treads. Next, the far end guard. Then the guard on the right, and the engineer working on this fuel tank. Take out the guard at the bottom of the decline. And oh, right, also there's a guard over here. Finally, take out the last engineer on the ground. The engineers higher up don't have a good enough vantage point to see the fuel tanks, so you can plant all of the charges without worry. Next, let's try an approach without the costume. Let's start by hitting the engineer up top. The guards will see the guy go down, but again, they will not see Snake. We'll run to the door and hide in the cardboard box. When they run past, we can take them from behind. Hitting them with CQC is the fastest way to take care of each quickly. There's a risk here if we leave them stunned, though. They'll often wake up before we're done with this area, and as we observed in a previous video, they'll go into caution if they wake up from a stun. So we'll still hit them with CQC, but also follow up with tranquilizer rounds so that if they wake up, they won't go into caution.
What's wrong?
Use the perch to hit these two engineers with the Mark 22, but be sure to be quick since they'll go into alert after too long, as we saw before. Make sure that this engineer is on his way back down the ramp before advancing. Peek out from behind this obstacle to hit the guard at the bottom of the decline. And then take care of the engineer by the lower tank.
It's just my imagination.
We'll go higher to clean up the rest. We can hit the console engineer from this perch. And on this bridge, we can stand above the final guard, peek out, and shoot him over the ledge. And now to finish off the last engineer. And if anyone hasn't gone down, you can just put another dart in them and they'll go right to sleep. I don't think you'll need to go through as much trouble in this area to complete it quickly as I've shown in the past two segments, and I mainly want to show off how many playground elements this area has. I actually think that this is the worst designed area in the game. Most of the other areas have a variety of ways to achieve specific goals that advance the game, and that's really the fun of it. There's something at stake. The Shagohod hangar likewise has a lot of options available, but only a very small number actually funnel Snake toward the goal. A lot of people don't even know that there are ladders and walkways here precisely because no one needs to use them, and they don't contribute at all to meeting the set piece's goals. The elevation changes are neat, but without the same kind of purpose or urgency given to different tactics like in other areas, it stands out as inconsequential and ultimately wasted space. However you decide to approach this area, you'll want to prepare for the Volgin fight right before you set the final charge. You might be restarting a lot to practice, so you might not want to mess with your menus every single time you fire up a new game. Go into Survival Viewer and put on the sneaking suit. It can save you some damage as well as the occasional serious injury. Under the weapons menu, pull out the SAA and the glow caps we grabbed in the tunnel after getting Snake's gear back from EVA. Plant the last C3 and we're off to fight Volgin. I recommend placing another save at the start of this fight. I'm going to focus teaching the Volgin fight using just CQC. I think it's the most fun way to engage the fight mechanically, and it's one of 2 boss fights with patterns that appear designed specifically to respond to the CQC moves we've used so far. We'll start with the basic grab. You can grab Volgin much in the same way you grab a soldier to hold while interrogating. If you don't act fast enough when you've got him in a hold though, he'll throw Snake off, and Snake will take damage. You can grab Volgin whenever his body is not covered with electricity. His starting condition is a good example of what to look for as the fight goes on. You can throw Volgin forward from a hold. You have a number of follow-up options here. If you roll into him, he takes stamina damage and falls down. Note that only the roll and not the throw causes stamina damage. Next, you can throw Volgin to Snake's side. Which way you throw Volgin is largely up to preference. There's no practical difference between either position. The easiest CQC to pull off is the ground slam. Volgin can't break out of it, and it guarantees damage if you connect. Because the damage is so slight, you'll want to use more than just the ground slam in order to finish the fight before the countdown ends. Kicking Volgin once you've pushed him down is another follow-up option, but it's one of the weaker ones. Let's watch this a few times to get a feel for how much stamina damage each kick takes off. Kicking Volgin after a push knocks him on his face, which means you cannot follow up with another attack. With these rolls, watch how Snake passes over Volgin without registering damage after Volgin has landed flat on the ground. However, you can follow up with a roll after a ground slam. You can squeeze the most damage out of each grab with the SAA. Throw Volgin beside Snake and perform a 3-hit combo with the SAA. Then roll into him while he's on his knees. The roll will not knock him on his face, and you can actually register 2 rolling hits back to back. Sometimes, with the right angle, you can even register a 3rd. You can only roll into or punch Volgin once he's on the ground. If you try this while he's standing up, he'll just block your attack and you'll fly by harmlessly. Sometimes he will also kick Snake to the ground, but this is harmless. Its worst effect is to screw with your rhythm.
Don't let him beat you.
Now let's run through the first half of the fight. We'll use the SAA and roll method for speed. Volgin's charge up here is purely dramatic, so shoot him in the back to cancel this sequence and get back to the fight.
Let's see your dog, sis.
Running circles around Volgin is one of the best ways to keep ahead of his attacks. He's vulnerable to a grab when he sends an electric tendril out, so always capitalize on these attacks to keep draining his stamina. His auto-fire attack can be rough, but it's easily cancelled with good timing. Either grab him right when his electricity fades, or run far enough around him so he's turning right as he starts firing. You can afford to take 1 or 2 serious injuries from the bullets and also keep your Foxhound rank. Just be sure you grab him during Snake's invincibility period after taking the shot. He has an electric shield up during these attacks, so avoid them while also trying to bait him into performing either a heavier combo or another attack that leaves him vulnerable.
Ocelot, whose side are you?
Remember to unequip the SAA when you're not attacking Volgin physically. If the SAA is equipped otherwise, then he'll do this tendril attack, which will go directly towards Snake and cause serious damage. However, you can use the SAA to bait him into performing the tendril attack, and then you can take advantage of his vulnerability. So you'll equip the SAA to bait him, and then unequip the gun right when the attack starts. The tendril will stop going towards Snake, and you can circle around to catch his back.
Nice.
Just be sure you circle wide enough so you don't actually run directly into it.
That must have hurt. Get up!
And yes, you can do this during the entire first half of the fight.
Look out! God! That's it.
I recommend against continuing the bait and switch attack during the second half of the fight. You can connect with it, but he sends multiple tendrils in different directions, so it's much harder to catch his back. Next, we'll look at his melee attacks. As mentioned before, Volgin has an electric shield up as he chases Snake around the pit. Keep baiting him into attacking while also avoiding getting hit. Eventually, he'll perform a heavy combo, after which his shield drops. Here's a more successful counter of Volgin's auto-fire attack. Keep just on his periphery to attack when his shield drops. And if you're really not sure you can counter it in time, run directly into his shield before he starts firing. You'll take less damage from the shield than from a bullet, and you can counterattack during Snake's invincibility period. Remember, he's not always untouchable. We're going to look at this for a while to observe what he looks like when Snake can attack. If his shield isn't up, go for it. This clip also illustrates how important follow-up attacks are to beating this before the countdown ends. It takes a long time to drain his stamina with only ground slams.
Judo, eh? Damn it. Die! Hey! Ocelot!
I mean, it's been this long and we're still not even down to a quarter. So, use those follow-up attacks. It's easy to show successful executions of these strategies in curated clips, which frankly is what most of these videos do. Winning against Volgin requires responding to his actions in whatever order they trigger, so I'm going to show 1 more minute and a half of unadorned fight footage. Keep an eye out for each of his patterns and watch how I put the strategies already discussed into effect.
Judo, eh? Die!
And that's a pretty good summary of what you can expect from Volgin during the first half of the fight. The second half always starts with an upgraded bullet attack. You can circumvent this easily by laying on the ground right at Volgin's feet. He's usually vulnerable to a counterattack immediately afterward. Catching his blindside when he sends out tendrils is riskier in the second half. He'll sometimes counter your CQC with a spinning punch. Volgin will more frequently break out of a CQC hold during the second half of the fight, and if you've used the SAA and roll technique for the first half, I recommend switching to the ground slam and roll combo. It's just safer. Volgin will put his back to the corner when he does his auto-fire attack during the second half. You can also interrupt this attack by executing a punch-punch-kick combo when his shield drops. He will block and usually counterattack, but this is less damage than taking a bullet. You can throw out mushrooms to absorb electric attacks that you don't feel confident about avoiding. If Volgin breaks out of a hold, quickly create space and then run back as soon as his combo ends. Many of his attacks are still linear, so continue running circles around him to keep ahead of his moves. Toward the end of the second half, he'll send a line of electricity back and forth along the floor. A mushroom left in the open will absorb and cancel this move.
Let's see how you like this.
And it's a good idea to leave a mushroom in the environment in preparation for one of his attacks generally. As you see here, there's not enough time to throw out the mushroom so it can absorb the electricity before Snake gets shot. Here are some examples of the value of leaving mushrooms out in the open. I don't need to worry about planting them when Volgin attacks, I can just prepare to counter when his attack diffuses. Here are some general examples of whittling down Volgin's strength during the second half, along with an illustration of how to handle that electric line across the floor if you don't have a mushroom out to absorb it. And those are the main variations that you'll encounter during the second half of the fight. Now let's put all of these together into a full playthrough of the Volgin boss fight.
Here it comes. Snake. Die.
And there's the Cold War camo, which will be invaluable getting us through the next segment. The rest of the game is fairly straightforward, the escape sections in particular, so I'm going to limit our overview of those to the most expedient methods. The camo reward from Volgin's fight prepares us for the bike escape sequences ahead. When you don the Cold War camo, soldiers will not shoot at Snake while he's facing them directly. They don't want to fire on their own national flag, but they will shoot once you show them Snake's back, which has the American flag on it, so be mindful not to get surrounded. You'll want to pull out the Mark 22, Nagant, and stun grenades to deal with a variety of challenges ahead. The chaff grenades that I pull out here are for the Volgin fight, but we don't need to prepare for that just yet. You can't damage the Shagohod significantly during these sections without also risking casualties, so I recommend just turning on the original camera angles and enjoying the action sequences of this first segment.
Up ahead!
There they are!
Here you can see that the soldiers will not fire on Snake while he's facing them directly. You can honestly deal with the most troublesome parts of this section by simply staring your enemies down. I find the third-person camera introduced with the subsistence release of the game less useful here, since it's really most engaging to act in first person here, and the original camera angles are really quite good. First person again is ideal here since EVA swerves quite a bit, and coordinating Snake with those movements in third person is cumbersome and imprecise.
Look up ahead!
Over there!
I recommend using the Nagant to pick off these soldiers at a distance. They're not huge threats, but taking them down will reduce the threat of stray bullets hitting Snake during EVA's square dance with the Shagohod. The Nagant is not designed for quick firing. I cancel out the cycling animation by toggling the Nagant on and off. This makes it ready to fire near instantly. I don't recommend bringing it back up while looking through the scope for orientation purposes. Sometimes your range of vision changes because of the bike's movement, and you can get quicker, more accurate sights by fixing things in standard first person and then going back into the scope. The second section requires more attention than the first, since the Shagohod isn't chasing you immediately and there are more soldiers. You only actually need to take out anyone at a handful of bottlenecks, so there's no crucial need to shoot these guys with the Mark 22 as long as you're facing them with the Cold War camo on. This is the first bottleneck. You need to clear out these guys at a distance, so the Nagant is ideal. If you don't have the Nagant, you can still pick them off with the Mark 22. The guy on the roof is actually pretty neat when you've got the Cold War camo on. He won't fire his rocket, and he'll actually perform the RPG-7 reload animation when he hasn't even attacked. Don't worry if you don't shoot him. He won't catch you from behind when EVA circles the building. And here's the second bottleneck. The guys who EVA just drove through will funnel into this alley, and you can pick them off easily. Worry less about preventing the other guys from firing, and focus your Cold War stare on the guy with the RPG-7 on the roof. Do the same for the other guys with RPGs on these towers as EVA exits the area. The runway sequence here is even easier since the only enemies come at Snake from one direction. I've avoided using special camos up to this point because I'm more interested in engaging the game in terms of basic skills and level design. The special camos usually exempt you from some of the restrictions that you have to manage, and most of these videos focus on those restrictions as the substance of what makes this game good. However, the escape sequences are so flat and straightforward that they don't really need much elaboration. In this instance, it's actually more interesting to see how the game breaks itself with the Cold War camo than it is to discuss the depth of the chase sequences, because there really isn't any. I mean, you just shoot dudes. You can do some fun stuff with the runway part, though. Only the sidecar riders can shoot Snake, and the bikes will continue to chase Snake and EVA as long as the drivers are in place. You can tame the whole segment by picking off just the sidecar drivers, leaving you with an entourage of impotent rage. We're going to need some special equipment for the Shagohod part of the runway segment. We'll have two main priorities. First, to shoot the Shagohod's treads and stall it out. Second, to pick off the missiles fired into the air at Snake and EVA. If you didn't pick up the RPG-7 on the mountain, then it will automatically appear in Snake's inventory during the chase. Presumably, EVA has one in the sidecar. The M63 is great for the missiles, since inaccuracy matters less when the missiles get close, and I prefer to keep a steady stream of lead going. You want to keep hammering the Shagohod with RPGs when it gets close, but wait for all of the bikes to have fallen aside before you begin attacking. It would be terrible if splash damage from a missile cost you your Foxhound rank here. You just saw the end goal of hammering the Shagohod's treads with the missiles. You won't actually damage it, but you will throw it off kilter, which prevents it from attacking you, in most ways. Its bike rams are the most obnoxious, and you don't need to deal with them when you force distance between Snake and the tank. And if nothing else, forcing the Shagohod to stall out can save you from vomiting from the motion sickness incurred by toggling the RPG on and off spasmodically.
I planted 4 C3 charges. Down! 3 more bombs left. 3 more left.
This sniping sequence is likewise straightforward. I try to take out the swinging bomb third and leave a static bomb for last. Sometimes you can slip up and miss the swinging bomb if you leave it for last when the Shagohod crosses the bridge.
It's still too early. It's here!
Now we finally face off against the Shagohod. As with the past several segments, this fight is fairly straightforward. Shoot the Shagohod's treads to stall it in place. EVA will drive around so you can hit the hind part of the cockpit with an RPG. That is literally all there is. You can throw out a chaff grenade to slow the Shagohod's responses, but this can be largely unnecessary provided you keep hitting the treads with RPGs. As before, toggle the weapon on and off to maintain a steady barrage. You can sometimes land successive hits to the backside of the cockpit without needing to foul up the treads again. As a visual cue, you can see the little electric threads dwindle and disappear, and you can attack again just shortly after they're gone. Really, so much of this fight is wash, rinse, and repeat. You can also hit the Shagohod's weak spot from the side. It's tricky, and it doesn't have quite the exposed flank as when you're right behind it, but you can move the fight along just a little more quickly by getting a feel for its location, particularly if you stall the Shagohod while EVA is circling in the same direction that the Shagohod is turning, which prevents full access to the rear.
I can't move!
The Shagohod's boss patterns are a development of traditional Metal Gear fights in the series. Starting with Metal Gear 2, Snake attacked the legs of the Metal Gear D with grenades. Metal Gear Solid developed this pattern with Rex into attacking a peripheral spot, the radome, before being able to attack the cockpit directly. Metal Gear Solid 2 remixed these elements as Raiden attacked the Metal Gear raised legs before shooting the open virtual cockpit. And Metal Gear Solid 3 tweaks the pattern further by having Snake attack the treads, which are stand-ins for legs, also peripheral targets, in order to hit the truly vulnerable part of the Shagohod, the cockpit, from behind instead of from the front.
Got it.
Snake damaged the legs of the Metal Gear in the first game on the MSX, but that's more of a sabotage operation than an action boss fight proper. It is a foundation for later patterns, but it's of a different sort.
What have you done?
And that's how it's done. The second stage of the Shagohod fight takes a little more skill, but it's essentially straightforward as well. You'll need to distract Volgin away from EVA at the outset, and I recommend using the Nagant or the Mark 22 to hit him from behind. He'll remain more stationary in your scope or iron sights if you watch him while he's on the outer edge of a revolution. If you're hurting for accuracy there, you can also hit him with an RPG from behind to get his attention, which isn't a problem since the point is to end the fight non-lethally. So lethal weapons during the fight that don't end it are perfectly fine. Your cue for action comes when Volgin says, "I'll grind you into dust." The cardboard box trumps the Shagohod here. Equip the box and run underneath the Shagohod just parallel to and next to one of the treads. He never charges in a circle, only forward, so he'll roll over you harmlessly. Take advantage of his cooldown after that charge to plug him in the back of the head with either the Nagant or the Mark 22. If Volgin attacks using the mounted machine guns, just roll forward to position Snake underneath the guns. This cancels their attack, and it raises the likelihood that Volgin will initiate his charge attack.
I'll grind you into dust.
And that takes care of that. Now the final chase segments begin. These are about as challenging as before, so there's not a whole lot more to add. There are a couple of cement pockets with riders ready to give chase, and you can annul those threats by tossing a stun grenade right into the corner before the bikers take off. When Snake and EVA get ambushed later during the sequence, just keep looking at the soldiers with a Cold War camo to stave off too much gunfire. Stun grenades can help keep them off your back while EVA weaves through them if you're not using the camo. I do like what the chase sequences add to the overall feel of MGS3's spatial presence. One of the ideas behind the game's pacing is that Snake arrives at a location far from his final destination, and most of the game involves his encounters as he covers that distance. Exfiltration is an important part of reinforcing that sense of space. By covering so much ground so quickly, we get a feel for the difference between infrastructure and wilderness, and we get a sense of the area surrounding Groznyj Grad as an expanse rather than as a series of comparatively cramped spaces. To digress a little bit, the infiltration-exfiltration differences here remind me of something I experienced back in 2000. I decided to walk 26 miles along a highway to a friend's house to test the difference between the experience of traveling across larger, unbroken terrain versus my more normal experience of walking in a wooded area with less visibility. Those longer, unbroken distances were muted to my experience because of cars and other transportation technology, and I was curious to see what those conveniences protected me from, so I could engage those conveniences with greater appreciation. Of course, if you're poor, that experience with long physical spaces is too often a reality that you have no future guarantee of convenience to circumvent, so in this sense, self-exploration is in many ways a luxury available to few. So the differences between the beginning and end of MGS3 reminds me of that. EVA can make her way between Groznyj Grad and Snake's current position at any point during the mission precisely because she has vehicle transportation, which does at times raise the question of why Snake doesn't use that convenience to shorten his trip by whatever degree. Anyway, the difference becomes one of intensity. Snake encounters many guards in a comparatively small space, and using a more restricted space communicates the upward struggle, whereas a more diffused space here becomes a kind of release of that tension. I think that the comparative simplicity of these segments reinforces that sense. The variety that's been characteristic of MGS3's design drops off, and that variety becomes associated with close-quarter spaces. These longer, open distance spaces reinforce the association by removing gameplay complexity as the local landscape becomes less consequential. The second part of this final stretch features the platform riders. You want to actually attack these guys in order to advance the sequence. If you just face them and prevent them from firing, they'll stare you down indefinitely. And in this context, non-lethal appears to be an academic distinction between death versus death under anesthesia.
Snake, up ahead!
This particular set piece is another reason to keep firing at the platform pursuers. Sometimes, if left alone long enough, one of them will fly over Snake and EVA and situate himself near the log. Splash damage from the RPG can damage his ride just enough so that it explodes and kills him. And that technology was never seen or heard from again. The scenery here is different, but the strategies and enemy patterns are just the same. Keep deterring and keep shooting. Again, the original camera angles are pretty great here. I think they're the best way to enjoy this chase.
Snake, right! Here comes our jump! Hold on tight! Yeah! What do you think of that? Not bad, huh?
This is the first of the two final foot-sneaking sections of the game. We didn't go through the forest after the sorrow with the transmitter left in Snake, but if we had, we'd have encountered the Ocelot unit patrolling the forested section, kind of looking for Snake. This is the closest to that segment in spirit, as Snake and EVA are being hunted by the remaining Groznyj soldiers. Given the fact that the boss nukes Groznyj Grad at the end of the game, these might be some of the few actual Russian survivors at the end of Operation Snake Eater. It hit them like a train wreck. We only need to heal up EVA after the crash in order to move the game along, so do that and then pull up the survival viewer. For the next sections we just need the MK22, the Nagant, and smoke grenades. We're putting the novelty camo back in the bag for the rest of the game, so switch back to the Tiger Stripe camo. Once suited up, look around the immediate environment for snakes on the ground. We'll need to keep Eva's stamina up so she can keep moving, and snakes restore a good amount, so we'll want 2 of those in reserve. No one's pursuing Snake and EVA during this first part of the forest, so it's the best place to stock up. Head down this southwest path to trigger the actual pursuit part of this area. This first part is very straightforward. You can get hung up trying to pick off the encroaching Groznyj, but you only need to delay them long enough to make your escape. Smoke grenades stall them long enough to create the distance we need. Send Snake down the eastern side of the level, and throw the first smoke grenade when just past this first tree. The Gru soldiers will be funneling down the path where you started, and this will choke them off right from the start. It's easier to stall them when they're clustered together there than when they're diffused later on. This second grenade typically does not land among them and obscure their immediate senses, but it puts a wall between their sight and where we're going. Some people knock Eva out and drag her across the level, and I prefer to keep her walking on her own for a few reasons. I think that it's faster, though I haven't quantified that, and dragging her is somewhat degrading in a way that I'm not really comfortable with. This is very much a modification of Raiden's escorting Emma in Metal Gear Solid 2, and the options are very much the same. The difference between MGS2 and MGS3 in that regard is that Raiden's options in MGS2 highlighted player choice by giving options that ultimately degraded Raiden as well. Olga told Raiden that Snake was fighting a cyborg ninja while Raiden was, quote, holding hands with that girl, close quote, which cast Raiden's responsibilities in light of an adolescent date, while Snake's responsibilities were a presumably awesome off-screen boss fight. You know, Raiden was at the kids' table. And that's the more positive option. Knocking out Emma and dragging her in MGS2 gave the player a choice that actually reflected badly on Raiden in-universe, as Otacon and other support characters would actually get angry with him for the degradation and abuse. It's a rare example in the series where voyeurism and sexualized abuse are used to degrade the voyeur and the abuser rather than the victim, or at least the victim alone. And MGS3 puts the series on the path that it continues to take by turning a woman's humiliation into a matter of personal convenience and actual face value humor. This is problematic in ways that I'll get to later on, but it's worth noting here that this is an instance of some broader problems that persist in MGS. Once you've taken out the first bunch of guards as just shown, run down this path and stop at the overlook. Several Gru are hiding camouflaged in the underbrush. They're so well hidden it's easy to mistake even their heat signatures as animals or usable plants. The first guy is in these bushes directly ahead. Once you shoot him, the other nearby hidden Gru will pop up and reveal his position. Take him out, and then take out the other guard to his left. Next, look at the base of the overlook and take out the guard prone there. Our final guard is lying next to a log on the right. Pick him off and then head back to Eva.
Snake.
You can't eat any meals for a Foxhound rank, but feeding Eva does not count against your meal tally. Use the snakes to bring her stamina up to full and walk her to the end of the level.
Well, not bad at all.
As you move, make sure that nothing breaks Eva's line of sight, and make sure you don't get too far ahead so that you blend in too well with the environment. It can be sometimes hard to locate Eva if she gets lost. Now we're ready to take on the boss. I'm going to show you how to handle her using only CQC, which is easier than you might think, so we're going to prepare for that here. Throw on the sneaking suit, and put everything else away. Now we're in cannon country. To hit the boss with CQC, you need either to counter one of her physical attacks or catch her by surprise. Countering her is the most reliable method. The boss will run up to Snake and grab him for a CQC attack. You'll usually hear Snake grunt when this connects. There's a short time frame during which, on other difficulties, a white exclamation point appears over Snake's head. The exclamation point doesn't show up on Euro Extreme, but the time frame is still open. On the PS3, press and hold the circle button during this time frame, roughly after Snake grunts, and you'll counter the boss's CQC. If you're playing on another platform, I expect you'll just press and hold whatever buttons corresponds to a CQC attack on that system. Snake will perform one of 3 counter animations, and the boss will be open for an attack. Hit her with a standard ground slam, and then take cover behind a tree. When she gets up, she'll start attacking with the Patriot, and you want something between you. After the boss fires a couple of volleys with the Patriot, she'll start running to take cover. Immediately pursue her. You're fighting her close quarters, so you don't want to get caught in any distance attacks. Since most of your opportunities appear after countering the boss, you want to keep her in range, so she'll try to attack you with CQC. You're essentially trying to keep baiting her. If you happen to screw up the counter, mash all your buttons and shake the analog stick rapidly to break free of her hold. You can roll into her after breaking free to knock her down, which mainly helps creating time to take cover. It doesn't damage her significantly. The camera can be an obstacle during this fight. It's one of the few areas, maybe the only one that I can think of, where a controllable camera was not added with the Subsistence release, and that decision hurts its execution. Control the camera with the right analog stick and click the analog stick to fix the camera in place. If the boss is at an awkward viewing angle, run Snake in circles to get the camera to move toward a better position. If she's directly out of sight toward the bottom of the screen after you run behind a tree, the camera will automatically adjust so that she's above Snake in the screen's orientation, which can be also really confusing. This fight is interesting to me thematically because it abandons all of the tactics we've used with Snake up to this point, especially if we're using CQC. The game has emphasized camouflage and stealth, and the fight against the boss is, in some ways, most easily managed by donning a black suit in a white field and aggressively staying on top of your enemy. This uses interactivity to characterize Snake. Snake's personality has been averse to fighting the boss for the entirety of the game, and fighting her requires a reversal of his personal inclinations. Appropriately then, the strategies available to the player here are also reversed from what we've been doing for the majority of the game.
You're better than I remember.
And if you're close enough, you can actually catch her with CQC while she's running and while she has her back to Snake.
Let's see what you're made of.
The sneaking suit reduces the damage that Snake takes if you're unlucky enough to get hit by the boss's CQC. I will sometimes use the Sorrow's novelty camo during this fight because it helps to catch the boss off guard, enabling me to ground slam her without countering her first. When chasing the boss around the area, Snake's footsteps cue her to Snake's presence. This costs you the element of surprise, but it also helps to bait her into attacking. The Sorrow's camo mutes Snake's footsteps, which makes it possible to catch her with CQC while she's hiding behind a tree.
You're better than I remember.
You can also close in on her while she's running, since she won't know you're nearby, meaning she'll keep running instead of turning to attack. I got lucky by catching her at the start of her dash at the end of the last video. This is more a deliberate consequence of this strategy.
You'd better run.
Also, for your viewing pleasure, I offer more examples of what screwing up looks like. And that is an example of rolling into her after breaking free from a hold in order to create space.
Your skills have improved.
To clarify on the value of using the Sorrow's camo here, this isn't necessarily a faster way to end the fight. The speed of this fight usually depends upon variables outside of your control, or it depends upon successfully countering most of the boss's CQC attacks. We're not speedrunning here, just working to get below the threshold for the Foxhound rank, so this probably is not where you'll want to focus attention if you're trying to reduce your runtime.
Excellent, Jack. Excellent, Jack.
Much of the time, she'll reliably grapple Snake for CQC when they contact from her front, so you can run into her head-on and hit the circle button to counter immediately.
Get ready! Nice try. All these years and still nothing to show for it. Move or you're dead.
And, of course, never initiate an attack from the front. She'll counter and it's gonna hurt.
You're better than I remember. You're better than I remember.
And that's how the West was won. Or the East, or whatever. And there you go, Foxhound Rank. I hope that you've enjoyed these videos, and I hope that they help with your own Foxhound Rank playthrough.